Hello, everyone. I'm Kenny Rice, and welcome to this episode number 15 of the Horse Racing Show. And, of course, we're just hours away from the Kentucky Derby, the most important race in America. Why? Well, because that's the one people know most. That's the one they talk about the most. That's the one that will have the largest viewing audience on NBC again this weekend. Upwards of 18 million people will be tuning in. Sometimes it gets up to 20 as the big race nears. It's an exciting, wide-open field, it would appear this time around, but you just never know. The favorites have won 6 straight. That's never happened in the history of the Derby. It's been run since 1875. So, who's going to win it this year? We'll try to break that down a little more later on. You've heard from some of the trainers. Just last week, Richard Mandella and Bill Mott joined us. You heard from Bob Baffert 2 weeks ago. I have a feeling that Baffert's going to be in the mix along with Richard Mandella and Jason Service with the Maximum Security. Those seem to be like the ones to keep an eye on as we get ready for this year's Derby. The Derby's always interesting. We're going to have a visit later on at Churchill Downs that we taped earlier. We'll take a look at the Kentucky Filly race, the Kentucky Oaks. That's the 3-year-olds for fillies. And probably, of course, if you listen to something called the Horse Racing Show, you already know that. For those that casually pass through sometimes and listen to us, and we appreciate that, it is a huge deal for the fillies. And we'll talk to the guy, Dallas Stewart, who's had the longest shot to ever win a Kentucky Oaks. He had a long shot win the Ashland Stakes at Keeler, and that's why he's back in the Kentucky Oaks. He is the master of being overlooked until it comes up for a huge race, and that's when he seems to be at his best. And in just a few moments, we'll talk with Jay Hovdey, one of the most famous writers and most respected writers that have covered horse racing for decades. He, of course, the senior writer for the Daily Racing Form. He has written several books as well. He's an interesting guy who has a lot to talk about, not just about horse racing. We might even get into some music when we talk to Jay Hovdey just coming up in just a few minutes. You know, something interesting about the Kentucky Derby, and doing all the research and looking this up, there's never been a trainer born and raised in Louisville who has ever won the Kentucky Derby. Scott Hall on lead guitar as well as always this week. Did you know that, Scott?
I did not.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you think about it, there's been 3 heavyweight boxing champions come out of Louisville. Of course, you know Muhammad Ali.
Right.
His sparring partner, Jimmy Ellis, later became heavyweight champ. And then Greg Page, heavyweight champ. And, of course, for over a century, Louisville was known all over the world for a famous baseball bat. And yet, you would think that the most famous race in the world would have had some native son or daughter win the race at least once, wouldn't you?
You'd think so, man.
It's crazy, isn't it?
It's crazy, yeah.
I mean, I thought it was. And, I started thinking about all the trainers. I thought about Mark Cassey, who grew up around the corner from Churchill Downs, but was actually born in Indianapolis. George Weaver has Vacoma, who won the Bluegrass Stakes, who is a Louisvillian. And maybe he'll have a chance.
Maybe.
He's the Louisvillian, so we'll see if this is the year that things change, and if it does, that would be part of history. Of course, Vacoma will be a bit of an outside shot. Derby time is the time of the year when people get excited about horse racing. It's a time of the year when it's a positive energy usually surrounding the biggest horse race. Of course, everybody wants to know who wins. You got a lot of horses that are running out there. People that know some of the trainers, and Bob Baffert with that white hair is obviously the most recognized one, but they'll be reading up on some that they may not be familiar with. I have Jason Service, I'm pretty sure is going to be one that will get more attention than he's ever received in his life. He came in here with a horse that you could have bought if you'd claimed him before the race for $16,000 back in the winter. No one did. What a story that would be if Maximum Security, who looked great in the Florida Derby, goes on to win it. And because of that, Jason Service had to cancel his annual May fishing trip because he might have already hooked the big one in Maximum Security. He couldn't lure anybody else into claiming him for a really cheap price by horse racing standards. And now he is not in uncharted waters because it was in 2004 that his brother John brought an undefeated horse to Churchill Downs, and not many people knew about John Service at that time. And, of course, John Service is well known now as the trainer of Smarty Jones, who captured America's heart, winning two legs of the Triple Crown, starting with the Derby in 2004. So Jason's service might turn out to be a real story if he's able to pull this off and people will learn about him. He's one of those good horsemen that's never been able to, get a horse together to come to the Kentucky Derby. He's won races. He continues to win races. He's winning at a really good clip down south in Florida. So it's not about how good he is. It's about getting that right horse. As we talked about last week with two Hall of Famers who've never won the Kentucky Derby, Richard Mandela and Bill Mott. They certainly know how to win. They've had some great horses. It's just their focus hasn't been on the 3-year-olds. And I still come back to the time when you've had trainers come in after gaps or making rare appearances in the Derby, like Charlie Whittingham when he won it with Ferdinand for the first time. He was in his 70s. Of course, he won it again with Sunday Silence. Carl Nafsker was a bull rider, former bull rider that came in 90 and won it with Unbridled. People respected him as a horse trainer, but he'd never had a big 3-year-old till Unbridled. And then Mac Miller, one of the real gentlemen of the sport, came in with Sea Hero and also won the Kentucky Derby after a long absence. So that always makes me wonder and take a look at guys like that, like Barclay Tagg, who's a well-respected trainer up in the East, primarily in the New York area. Didn't really venture to the Derby. In 2003, he comes in and wins it with Funny Side. So it'll be interesting to see. Shug McGahee, you could add to that list too. A Hall of Fame trainer, had some good horses, never really pointed toward the Derby. Did well with fillies, mares, some older horses, but had success. There was Easy Goer, of course. It was really good in 1989 for him that won the Belmont. But finally he comes in 13 with Orb and wins his first Kentucky Derby. So that's the best thing about the Kentucky Derby, and I think that's what brings people back every year. The storylines. There's something new, something interesting every year. You're going to have the veterans, the familiar faces. Then you're going to have the newcomers in there, people maybe you haven't heard of. And that's what makes a sporting event exciting. And that's why people, I believe, turn in to see the Kentucky Derby. Okay, that and to see what people are wearing. What are you wearing to the Derby, Scott?
I think it's going to be Levi Strauss and maybe some Under Armour.
Yeah. That's smart. That's smart because when it's really hot, that's the perfect thing to wear.
That's right.
Some of those people, it's amazing to me how much money they spend and for like a one day off. It's like a wedding.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, they'll spend all this money to dress up. Yeah, it's the prom for adults.
Right.
You just said it. That's
exactly.
right.
That's what it is.
The Derby is the prom for adults with liquor and gambling involved. All you young people, don't try that at home for those listening in.
That's right.
All right, we'll talk more about the Kentucky Derby later on. Dallas Stewart will join us from Churchill Downs, and he'll talk about the Kentucky Oaks. Next up, though, from the Daily Racing Forum, Jay Hovdey, right here on The Horse Racing Show. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. Thank you for watching and liking us on the YouTube channel, listening to us on iTunes and Google Play, and, of course, following us Facebook and at Horse Racing Show on Twitter. I always enjoy talking to this guy and read him often. He is as good as it gets in covering horse racing. He's always opinionated and thought-provoking, and isn't that what you want in a columnist? On any level, be it politics or sports, and Jay Hovdey provides that for the Daily Racing Forum, and he joins us now. Jay, welcome into the show.
Well, thank you very much, Kenny. It's a pleasure to be here on your podcast. This is an exciting new platform for you. Platform, that's the right word, isn't it?
We are on a platform, actually. Just kind of got a platform and some couches around here, yeah.
There you go. Wish I was there with you, but out here in California and getting ready for the Derby Week celebration ahead and whatever we have going on at Santa Anita and the rest of the country.
I am always curious. I think one of the toughest things is to write and write well all the time. And do you ever have like writer's block? Do you ever think, well, I've covered this, I've covered that. How many times can I cover this or that?
Well, I had an editor once tell me if you don't make your deadline, we run 12 inches of blank space with your name and face in it, Jay. So, that's a lot of incentive to meet your deadlines on a regular basis. I have to admit, though, that I'm pretty lucky to be writing about horse racing because if you run out of things to write about or that you're interested in horse racing, then you're just not paying attention. I can't think of another sport that has more levels and layers of interest, excitement, intrigue than our game. I mean, golf, it's, hit the ball, find the ball, hit the ball. Baseball, we know it's catch the ball, hit the ball, throw the ball, but horse racing, well, I tell you, there's on any given day, it's just really a feast, a movable feast.
We were talking earlier when I opened up the show, Jay. I was talking about the reason that, in my opinion, is a lot like what you just said, that the Kentucky Derby is so popular and has such a big audience each year with NBC, is simply that, because of the stories, because of the people involved. And that's why you have people that may watch only one horse race a year or will glance at some horse races, but they'll watch the Kentucky Derby for the pageantry and to hear the story of a Jason Service, or to see if Bob Baffert's going to do it again, or can Richard Mandela or Bill Mott do it this time around. There's so many great storylines, and that's what always drew me to horse racing, is you can have 4 or 5 storylines around one horse.
Well, of course, the Kentucky Derby has been a public relations phenomena from early on, more than 100 years, and certainly it benefits from being a cultural event more than a sporting event. I know that there are people who would tell you that they don't follow horse racing, but they'll watch the Kentucky Derby. That's fine, and that makes for a great week of exciting coverage and the telecast itself. But those of us in the game that are in for the long haul, we're there for the other 51 weeks of the year, and I think that the Derby as a sports attraction is it's kind of a one-off from the rest of the game in many ways, because none of these horses will ever run in a race like this again.
Yeah.
And they never have run in a race like this before. So it doesn't tell you anything in particular about the horses that compete in it or run in it. You just hope that some of the good ones emerge from it and go on and become stars with a little bit of longevity.
When did Jay Hovdey first get interested in horse racing? Is this something you grew up around and with and all?
Well, let me think. I was looking back to see what the first Kentucky Derby. What was your first Kentucky Derby that you remember, Kenny?
Well, contrary to popular belief, it wasn't Donnerell and it wasn't Regret. No. It was actually 1981 was the first one I covered.
Well, but how about the first one you remember?
First one I remember. Was probably Northern Dancer.
Ah, very good.
I would say Northern Dancer. I was a kid watching it on a black and white TV set. And, we would watch, because I didn't grow up in the horse racing world, even though I grew up in Kentucky. I grew up in the sticks and ball sports, football, baseball, basketball. Yeah. I like to watch boxing. But we always watched the Kentucky Derby. I don't know, because it was a Kentucky Derby. Like you say, it was kind of something, especially being a Kentuckian, you thought you should do. So Northern Dancer is the first one, Jay, that I can remember watching on TV. And then I watched it every year. And then, like I say, I've been fortunate to cover it since 81.
And you broke my heart with Hill Rise, who was my childhood hero, the Calbred, just a big, massive, marvelous animal, looked like a mountain in motion. And he won everything in sight in California that winter. And George Pope thought he was being smart, and he knocked Don Pierce out of the saddle for the Derby and put Bill Shoemaker on, who was, like printing money.
Yeah.
And didn't know the horse well enough, and Hardtack outsmarted him and beat him, I think, maybe 3/4 of a length or whatever it was in the Derby that year. But my first Derby would have been a couple of years before that, with sitting at my grandfather's knee watching Silky Sullivan and Tim Tam.
Oh, yeah.
And, and I was, of course, a little kid enthralled to the Silky Sullivan stretch running excitement. He came from farther out of it than Zenyatta.
Yeah.
And he won the Santa Anita Derby in a waltz, and went to Kentucky Derby with all the hoopla of a traveling minstrel show. And boy, I want to tell you, he was an exciting animal. And my grandfather just said, "Well, you better watch out for Tim Tam." My grandpa was right.
Yeah. Well, see, the wisdom of the grandparents, you can never go wrong with that.
Yeah. So that's as far back as I go. But the first one I covered was a little after you in 1985 with Spendabuck.
Oh, that was a story, wasn't it?
Yeah, that was exciting. I actually spent the most of the afternoon shagging interviews for Jack Whitaker with the telecast, the ABC telecast, I believe, in those days.
Yes.
And shagging interviews in the jockey's room. Jack would send word to bring so-and-so out to the interview area, and I would. And the most intriguing part of that day was watching Angel Cordero play head games with any other jockey that might have been on a speed horse. And by the end of by post time, Angel pretty much had it sewn up, and he broke like a bullet and never looked back.
Cordero is one of the great, one of the great interesting stories, isn't he? I think about guys that you could just sit down and probably talk for hours with. And, I think about one of my favorite horse racing books. You wrote it on Whittingham. I remember I got to sit down with Charlie on 2 or 3 occasions at length, length being maybe 20, 25 minutes, and just talking, not necessarily an interview, just talking. And, guys like that just always fascinate me. I met Bill Shoemaker a few times, interviewed him a few times, and of course, Lafitte Penkai. And, there's something special about those guys. To me, it's like getting a chance to talk to, any great athlete or, any great coach.
Well, that's true. And a lot of the people from those eras, they lived lives that, they seem like on alien planets compared to the way we were brought up as kids of the 50s and 60s and into the 70s. They fought world wars. They suffered through depression, and made it through. And horse racing was their oasis, was their rescue in many ways. These are people that might have been able to do something else, but or they found a real home in horse racing, and that's what made them interesting, because they'd lived lives that we really couldn't identify with necessarily. It was a lot of fun having those people around, and we're trying to create our own heroes and stories these days, but they kind of pale in comparison to that generation.
Yeah, that certainly some special people came out of there, and I think back on guys that I always enjoyed talking to that I didn't want to interview live on TV, and one of them is the late Bobby Frankel. I could go to his barn and start talking baseball cards, and baseball, and he would have these great stories, and always in talking about his horse, but he just didn't like the camera. He didn't seek that attention. And, he was okay with it, but it wasn't like it was something he'd much rather be somewhere else when I interviewed him. I don't know how many guys you came across like that. No, it wasn't any kind of adversarial situation. He just would prefer not to be interviewed, but he knew sometimes he, I guess, sort of had to be.
Well, they weren't raised in a media climate like the hyper climate that has evolved over the last, say, 25 years. And at a certain point, in the sporting culture, if your face wasn't on TV on a regular basis, you weren't doing your job. So when someone like you walk up to Alan Jerkins with a microphone, you might as well be walking up to him with a hot poker. Yeah. Charlie Whittingham had to sort of accommodate it through the years. I mean, he was a pretty kind of grouchy old Marine who just leave me alone, let me do my job. He was great socially, but when it came to dealing with the media, it was how short can my answer be? But he learned to kind of fall back on some of the the great stories of his past, and there's other trainers that have done that too. I mean, wonderful guys like Buddy Raines and I'm blanking out on the great Maryland trainer that Chris McCarron came up under. But anyway, there's a lot of that generation that they supplied us with just automatic material, and it was wonderful to sit around and just listen to them talk for as long as they could, or till the next set went out.
One thing I've noticed, Jay, doing this podcast now for about 3 months. A lot of the people we've had on, the trainers especially, and even a couple of the jockeys, they don't have Twitter and they're not active in social media. They're not doing Instagrams, which I don't do much of. I have a Twitter account. I send out a few things and, kind of to promote something I'm doing. But, but I know some of the younger guys, some of the younger trainers, they are getting in. They understand the social media, and that's just the way of the world these days. But horse racing, there's still enough guys like Bob Baffert. I don't know if he sent out a real tweet in 2 or 3, 4 years. I don't know.
Well, I can't answer for Bob.
Yeah.
He'd be fun to get into his head on a regular basis.
Oh, wouldn't it though?
But he's certainly he's very approachable by anybody that wants to ask. It's part of their business these days. I think their clients expect their trainers to have a certain public profile, but then there's other trainers that just do their job. I mean, you don't hear from Chad Brown except when he's talking after he wins a Grade 1 race. You don't hear from Neil Drysdale. You don't hear from a lot of these guys that they don't. I always fall back on John Stewart of Comedy Central fame and the Daily Show. He was asked once, why don't you have a Twitter account? Why aren't you on Facebook, et cetera, et cetera? And he says, because I have my own show.
Exactly.
Well, these guys have their own show, and their horses speak for them.
Yeah.
So they don't. I mean, if they want to be gadflies on Twitter, if they want to get involved politically, that's great. I mean, they're citizens, and they're in the culture, and they have families and friends, and presumably friends that aren't even in horse racing. Leading surprisingly full lives. So it's kind of enjoyable to see how they operate. When they're not thinking about horse racing. But for the most part, the people that are involved in racing have to think about their job pretty much 24/7 because it's a difficult job if you're going to do well.
And I personally enjoy the fact that most of them don't, because like you just said, it's nice to see that there's still some people living lives without having to tell everybody every day about what they had for lunch.
What'd you have for lunch today, Kenny?
Well, I had a Caesar salad. Thanks for asking. I'm going to. I wish I'd taken a picture and I could have tweeted it out. You could have seen it. You could have taken a picture of what you've eaten and you could tweet it out, and then I could see it.
I have blocked people on Twitter because of some of the food they've. I mean, come on. Do we really need to see a picture of head cheese? I mean, come on, sausage. Do we? We just don't need that. That's borderline, pornography.
It is. It has to stop somewhere. And I figure, I've seen a few steaks in my life. I don't need to see a picture of another one. Hey, great, you're eating a steak. Never seen one. Thanks. Thanks
So what did you think of the Hall of Fame announcement this week?
I thought it was good. I was glad Craig Perrette got in. Okay, I was glad, among others, that he got in. I've known him for a long time, and I voted for him. And then some of the pillars. I like this pillars of turf that they're putting in now. Some guys I thought Warren Wright was already in the Hall of Fame. I had to go back and look this up. You know what I'm saying? Some of these.
Yeah, but there's never been a category for like owners and breeders.
Right.
And I think that's what I believe that's what the executive committee.
Yeah, and it's great.
The Hall of Fame had in mind that there were people that were not being recognized. Like the owners and executives wing of a Hall of Fame, and that's I think that's certainly what they had in mind to satisfy that. But Craig Perrette, his 12th time on the ballot. How about that?
I was just happy for him. I don't think I was really shocked to see all the people that were going in, the horses going in. I thought that was pretty much. Were you surprised by anybody that's going in?
Oh, not at all. I mean, I was certainly gratified that. Weah and My Juliet will be entering, both one from the contemporary voter group and the other from the historical group. I mean, we got to see Weah on both coasts. She was an amazing international traveler who went, and how lucky was she? She was trained by Angel Penna Sr. and David Whiteley. I mean, waking up in those guys' barns every day during her career, owned by Peter Brandt. And the Wildensteins at one point. So it was a great thing to see her. I mean, she carried 132 pounds out here one time in San Benito. That's unheard of. She and won on the dirt and the turf back east, and was just showed up all the time, beat the boys. They invented the turf mare category just for her, because the grass mares were kind of falling between the cracks way back when. There was no category for turf female. And so the way I had this fantastic year, but she didn't do it on grass, or she didn't do it on dirt, and there was a superior male on turf that year. Then the following year she comes back and she wins both turf and dirt, winning a race like the Beldame, and so she ends up being the older female champion, and another filly won the turf championship that was meant for weigh in the first place. So she moved the goalposts in a lot of ways.
We're talking with Jay Hovdey, outstanding writer from the Daily Racing Form. And now, Jay, if you will, just for a second, a musical interlude.
Now the sun shines bright over old Kentucky on the Derby day. They let him run. They let the big horse run.
I believe you can name that tune.
It is. That's the other John Stewart in my life.
Yes.
The great John Stewart from the Kingston Trio. Hopefully you've got some listeners that remember the Kingston Trio. John was the tall guy with the banjo, and he went on to a great solo career of his own. And unbeknownst to me, I was a big fan, but unbeknownst to me, he was an even bigger fan of my wife, Julie Crone. And when I got a little trinket from John's website for Julie's birthday one year, I got a call back from John himself wondering, is this the Julie Crone that I'm sending this to? And I said, well, yes, Mr. Stewart, dropping the phone.
Yeah?
And he said, well, I'd like to send her a few extra things. And a box arrived with, held together with spit, gum, and baling wire with with some of John's art, his CDs, some videos he'd shot, a book. I mean, it was unbelievable. And a couple of months later, he came down and watched Julie win the Pacific Classic.
Wow.
So John became a dear friend, and that is, if it's not my favorite song, it should be everyone's favorite horse racing song, because he wrote it about Secretariat. And he wrote it originally for a TV movie that never got made, and it ended up on one of his albums. Let the Big Horse Run, and the Big Horse, of course, in the title is Secretariat.
Well, for all those,
and you know it by heart.
yes, and we can't use any more because our royalties are limited here. We're just getting the show started. But
That's all right.
I really like that. When we talked at Santa Anita, I'll never forget when you told me about John Stewart. And I knew who exactly you were talking about. July, You're a Woman is one of my favorite songs.
Well, John's father was a standardbred trainer.
Yeah, he was in the horse bit. He grew up around it, right? At least.
Yeah.
Yeah.
John's father was a standardbred trainer on the California circuit, and he was training at Del Mar during the off season. They used to scrape the track and run a harness meet at Del Mar in the fall, and way back when. And we're talking about the late 1930s, for goodness sakes. And John was born in San Diego during that fall meet back then. And every time a horse came around the track, he thought of his upbringing, and he wrote a song about the Pomona Fair, and he wrote a song about Seabiscuit called Tanforan, and that was in addition to all his other bigger hits like Gold and July, You're a Woman, and
Never going back.
Yeah,
Never Going Back's another one of my favorites.
There you go.
And he wrote Daydream.
Now I know why. Now I know why I like you, Kenny. You got good musical taste.
See, I think if for those listening out here that are not familiar with John Stewart, the singer-songwriter, you should listen to him. I'd say listen to some Guy Clark, some Townes Van Zandt, some Rodney Crowell, and it'll give you a great perspective on things. And
Absolutely.
There's some others in there I could throw in, but those are four of my favorites. And he wrote Daydream Believer. Those monkeys were lucky, weren't they? That TV series, and people remember that. Say, heck, they had Neil Diamond, and they had like Carole King and people like that writing for them. Boyce and Hart wrote for them.
Yes, they were the vessels for a lot of good stuff. But Mike Nesmith came out of there, and David Cassidy, a big horse racing fan, and so it was not David Cassidy. I mean, goodness sakes, well, there was Mickey Dolenz, there was David Cassidy.
Yeah, well, David Cassidy was a big horse racing guy. I actually interviewed him a couple times in
good.
Kentucky. Yeah.
I'm mixing up my partridges and my
and your pear trees and your monkeys.
Don't ever put me on a trivia music from the '60s because I wasn't paying much attention. I was too much into horse racing.
Hey, well, this race coming up, Jay. Do you have any thoughts on this year's Derby? I mean, it's been a great string of favorites, which is so unusual, and actually, I don't think it's happened this many favorites in a row's won.
Yeah, it's getting a little boring, to tell you the truth. We need another Mind That Bird to come along and shake up the shake up the scene. I don't think that's going to happen anymore because the horses that get into the race have to have accomplished a little bit more than he did. But he was right on the day, and you can't knock that. No, this is going to be a very intriguing Derby. We tend to settle on in personalities a little too much, and certainly everyone who's followed either the careers of Bill Mott or Richard Mandela would like to see them with a Kentucky Derby by their name, but those guys don't wake up every morning wondering, how life has passed them by because they haven't won a Kentucky Derby. But the way they've handled horses and the records they've had with older horses, they're very much kind of like a Charlie Whittingham or a Bobby Frankel, who never really had an emphasis on developing young horses. Their clients weren't tuned to that direction. But when good young horses came around, they recognized the potential of a pretty good effort on the first Saturday in May as a 3-year-old, and they went on with it. Charlie won 2 Kentucky Derbies in his 70s, and Bobby Frankel was orienting toward that. He knocked off a Belmont Stakes before his very untimely death, and so I think that Bill and Richard, they'll be the kind of the sentimental exacta.
Well, Jay, go ahead.
With Tacitus in Omaha Beach, of course.
But
then you've got Shug breathing down their neck with Code of Honor, and you always are a little bit afraid of that guy with a gun that's even partway loaded. It's going to be fun to see a mix of first timers in the Derby, first time horsemen, and their clients with some of the veterans that we've been following for a long time. And that's what that's the fun part of the Derby. It brings a lot of those different threads together on a very intense contest and afternoon.
Jay, have you had a fun time today?
You mean before I started to talk to you?
Then. No, just your fun day overall. I was expecting...
my day was going along very, very nicely. I wrote a column earlier today, took my little girl to school, and then I said, boy, I tell you, now all that stuff's behind me. Now I get to talk to Kenny Rice.
I was saying the same thing. I said, I'm going to talk to Jay Hovdey later today. Because I talked to Julie.
Kenny. I hope we can do it again somewhere, maybe along the Triple Crown Trail, or certainly as we get into the summer fun at Del Mar and Saratoga. Because this promises to be a pretty fun year if some of these 3-year-olds develop.
Hey Jay, anytime you're always welcome. And hi to Julie. She was great. We had her on the show, I don't know, about a month and a half or so ago. She was wonderful as always.
She still talks about it. Say hi to that Kenny Rice, she said.
Well, she set a high bar for everybody, you and everybody else, believe me. So that was wonderful to have her on. And great to catch up with you, and I'll see you at Churchill Downs.
That's great, Kenny. Take care and good luck.
All right. Thank you very much. Jay Hovdey, Daily Racing Form, terrific writer. If you like horse racing, you got to read him on a regular basis. And we'll be back with more. We'll be going to take a little tour of Churchill Downs later on, right here on the Horse Racing Show. Welcome back to the Horse Racing Show. This week on the backside at Churchill Downs leading up to the Kentucky Derby. When we started this show, 3 months ago, we said we're going to bring some fun back to horse racing, talk to some interesting people. When I think of fun and interesting, seriously, my friend Dallas Stewart.
Well, Kenny, glad to be here.
Glad to have you with us.
Thank you.
Out for a Spin will be your horse in the Kentucky Oaks. And somebody said, what's a Kentucky Oaks in the past? People are not familiar with the sport. I said it's a Kentucky Derby for fillies.
That's a good answer.
Is that a good answer?
That's a good answer.
And everybody still comes around, wants to talk to anybody that's got a horse that week. Oaks horse, Derby horse, all week long.
It's big. It's a big race, and we're glad to be in it. She's a nice filly. She won at Keeler a couple weeks ago, so she'll be ready to go.
Long shot that you brought in that day.
Long shot, $100 for $2. How easy is that?
Let's see now, what trainer has won the Oaks with the longest shot in history?
That would be me.
That would be you.
Yeah.
And what trainers come close to winning the Derby twice with long shots have been runner-up?
I'm one of those.
That would be you.
Yeah, okay.
And you might have told you once before, I said, I don't care if you ever bring a mule out here to run again, like Derby or Oaks, I'm betting it. I don't care if it's 200 to 1.
Well, it's a horse race. That's what it comes down to.
What is the key, though? I mean, you do seem to have the knack for bringing horses along, and at just that right moment when people might have been overlooking them, like a lot of bettors have your horses in the past, that spring up there and put up a big number.
I mean, I don't know exactly what it is, but we just get in every morning and do our job, stay in the trenches, work hard, get them over there in good shape, train them up hard every day, and then sometimes you win big races or you place in big races. So just work hard every day.
And maybe handicappers should start paying more attention. That's just my thought.
Maybe so.
This is something I just thought I'd throw out.
Yeah, it's a good thought.
Did you like that?
Yeah, I like that.
What's it like for those people that are watching us now on YouTube or they're listening to us on Google Play or iTunes, and they haven't been to the Derby, they've watched it on TV, and they're going to see all the spectacle of the 165 and the cheering and all that. But what's it like over here in the weeks, days leading up now to the big race on the backside for all you trainers?
Well, it's starting to pick up. There's a lot of reporters like yourself starting to come in and get the groundwork of what's going on. And, most people have seen these horses run through the winter into the early spring. And that's just a great time. The great athletes that we have, these horses coming here to compete against each other. And it's a beautiful thing to be here at Churchill in the spring with a young 3-year-old that's ready to compete, whether it be a boy or girl.
Yeah, just to have that shot, isn't it?
And actually, this is a barn that I worked in with Wayne Lucas when we had Winning Colors. She was actually in that stall right there. I believe it's 23.
Right over there.
And right over here. This is my barn here.
Yeah.
But actually, in 1988, I was right here with Wayne Lucas. And this is where we got Winning Colors ready. She's one of 3 fillies in the history of racing to win the Kentucky Derby. She was a real special filly. So this is sacred ground, as you can say, for
Wow.
me.
And there's a lot of sacred ground around here, isn't there?
Yes, there is. There really is. I mean, you could ask people, where was Secretariat? Where was Spendenbook? Where was Seattle Salute? So they were somewhere on this backside.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty special place.
And I forgot about Wayne being over there.
Yeah, that was.
Because he's been so long at the other.
Right. We had about 10 horses only right here, though.
Right.
That was in '88.
Yeah. Before Wayne Lucas was just getting to be Wayne Lucas. Well, everybody knew who he was, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean, he was.
Before he just really started taking over.
Right. He was strong in the quarter horses.
Yeah.
Had 23 world champions, so he has a pretty good background.
Yeah, I met him when he had Codex. That was when I first met him in 1980. He just
That
come
was
off
a wild
the Preakness.
race, right? Yeah.
It was a wild race. What was it like with Lucas? What are the things that you learned from him, who's kind of the coach for a lot of people? We even had Baffert on, Bob Baffert, last week, and or a couple of weeks ago, and he was raving about Lucas. I mean.
Well, you know what? You show up here every day, and he's here, right?
Yeah, he's always here.
Well, there's something to that. He's here and he's working hard. He's working hard all day long, working at his business. He loves what he does, so that's part of it to me, that he's here every day and he works hard. He loves the game and he wants to do great.
You ever have a sick day? You don't have a sick day, do you?
I don't get paid extra on sick days. No, there's no sick days, not for horse trainers.
Well, that's why I said, in this sport, one of the fascinating things about this, Dallas, is that in racing, trainers and jockeys, you don't play, you don't get paid. You got no guaranteed contracts.
Listen, I got a lot of mouths to feed over here, people, horses. I got a lot of responsibility. So I got to be here and I got to work hard and get some accomplishments.
What is the day like for you? When does your day start?
Well, we get up usually around 4, so whatever, 3:30, 4. The track opens at 5:15 now, a little bit earlier than normal. And, my staff gets here very early also, and they get everything ready. So I usually roll in here about 5:15, 10 after 5, 5 o'clock, but they're ready to go. These people work hard. They're here working every day. They live here, they work here, they love it here. We have our own world back here.
It is different. It's a culture that people don't know until they kind of experience it.
Yeah, and everybody gets along. I mean, every ethnic, racial, different races of people. It's all about one thing: winning a horse race. It is not about anything else. We eat together, drink together, cry together, fight together, whatever. But we live together. It's a great thing.
Out for a spin, you'll be paying close attention, obviously, to the field that you're going to run against in the Kentucky Oaks. What does she have to do to win?
Well, you know what? She's coming off a really good race. She's doing great. She's actually, just stepping her game up every day, I think, where she's going to need to, because it's going to be another bunch of really nice fillies. It'll be the toughest race that she's ever run in.
Yeah.
So, but it's a horse race. It's worth getting in there and fighting it out and see what you can do.
Do you have a chance to, all the trainers, when you don't have that year where you have a Derby horse, you take some little peek out there every now and then to see somebody in a workout or at least galloping a little bit?
Yeah, it's pretty good here because most of the people train at 7:30 for 15 minutes, so everybody gets to kind of see what everybody else looks like.
And you get
But it's about what you look like. That's what counts to me.
And you get to hear all the gossip and all the rumors, don't you? I know, just covering it, somebody will come and say, hey, this horse doesn't look good, this horse looks good, this horse looks great, this horse is falling off.
It's never true.
It's hilarious. Right? I've yet to hear one. It's like the hot horse, like this horse can't miss. If I could hit all the horses that can't miss, I'd be rich.
There you go. So come on out, come to the races. Let's have some fun.
Dallas, always a pleasure.
Thank you, Kenny. You're one of the best.
Hey, thank you. All the best.
All right.
Out for a spin.
Thank you.
Not this guy. He's out to win with Out for a Spin in the Kentucky Oaks. We'll be back with more here on the Horse Racing Show. Give you a little tour of Churchill Downs here for those watching on YouTube. If you're listening to us, hopefully we can give you a picture. Barn area is over here. The horses will gather in this spot about 40 minutes or so before the Kentucky Derby. The trainers will be here. A lot of their owners will be walking over this way. And then they start bringing the horses out to the gap area. Of course, there's a lot of work going on at the track getting ready right now, but at least this will give you an idea. And right over here, hundreds, thousands of people actually will be lined up all down through there. These are people that work on the backside. These are the friends of theirs. A few of the trainers' friends will come over. They have a cookout. They have their own party here. And the expanse of Churchill Downs, from right here to over there where Millionaires Row is, it's a good half-mile away. So that gives you an idea how big this place is. And this is where it starts, and this is where they'll come to the gap, and the horses will gather down there, and they'll gather right here in this area, and then they'll start walking. And it's a real unique experience because I guess they've got the track down here. We won't walk too far out. Hi, how are you?
Good. Mr. NBC analyst.
Yes, good to see you. Thank you. Thank you. Those are the guys that are working really hard, and a lot of people work hard to make this all come together. So you come right here, and I'll meet up with one of the trainers. The other NBC announcers will all meet up with our trainer, which is not always easy because they don't bring them out in order. Number 4 may come out and number 18 may come out, and somewhere in between number 1 and 2 will come out. So it seems easy, and it's not complaining. It's not like we're lifting heavy things here. But you can easily lose your trainer if you don't pay close attention, because when you get a group of anywhere around 18 horses, 20 horses gathered in this area, and here comes all the people over to walk over with them. And especially it's always interesting when ladies are fine in their fine dresses and men are in their suits, sometimes they're cream-colored spring suits, and especially like last year when they're having to walk back over in the mud. It can ruin your fashion for the day, but there's still nothing like this experience because you've been in the barn area all day, now you're coming over this way, and suddenly you start seeing it. And then as you make that little turn there and you start toward the track, and everything is filled up. There's no empty seats. All you see are faces, and you hear the roar of the crowd, and 165,000 people are watching. And even veteran trainers, guys that have made the walk a dozen times or so in the past, still like to talk about how they get that butterfly in their stomach and maybe a lump in their throat at times because it is that special feeling. And the fans know, the fans are well aware of which horse is which, Even though they don't have their saddle cloths on at that time to identify them, they recognize the trainers immediately. They see the people that are walking with them immediately. And you might remember last week's show, we heard Richard Mandela talk about when he walked over with Soul of the Matter with the famous composer Burt Bacharach, that people were screaming at him. Well, every year they'll be screaming for Bob Baffert or whichever trainer is their favorite. And it is what this sport is, a sport. And I don't know if there's a better feeling for the sport itself than that walk over at the Derby, because you hear people cheering. You hear a few people jeering as well, busting on them, just like at a real sport event. And as many times as I've done it, and I've done it well over a dozen times, it's still a special feeling, especially with my position of being over here all day on the backside, to finally come over here. And you know the people are over here, but when you finally see them and you hear that crowd, there's nothing like it. And that hopefully gives you some idea when you watch NBC's coverage of where it takes place for the walkover and how it comes together. And this is as far as we're going to walk today, because they're doing things on the track and I don't want to get run over by a tractor. Welcome back. We get ready to wrap up this episode number 15 of the Horse Racing Show. Scott Hall, does it seem like it's 15 already?
It's I can't believe it.
Wow.
3 months.
3 months.
Goes by just like that.
I guess we're going to keep going, huh?
Here we are.
Okay, we'll keep going.
Let's do it.
We're going to take it up to the Derby. Now we'll take it through the Derby, so we'll be back next week. I was just, when we were talking to Jay Hovdey, who was friends with the late John Stewart, the songwriter, who wrote Daydream Believer. But I'm looking at the Monkees. My goodness, it was like having like Wayne Lucas and Bob Baffert and Charlie Whittingham and every great trainer taking care of your horse. And Neil Diamond wrote for them. Did you know that?
No.
Jerry Goffin wrote for them, who was Carole King's partner and wrote like many of the classics.
Oh, wow.
And Bobby Hart, Tommy Boy. No wonder the Monkees did have some catchy little songs, didn't they?
Oh, heck yeah.
See?
Yeah.
See, now we know.
Now you know what was behind the curtain.
You got the good music. It's like this. It's like when people ask me, why don't these horses, when they win the Kentucky Derby or they win, like last year with Justify the Triple Crown, why do they retire? Why don't they stay around? Why don't they, come back as a 4-year-old or a 5-year-old? Because it's about the money. It's just like a songwriter. The songwriter is going to keep making money on that song, off those residuals years from now. And that's what the breeding business is all about. The singer may make a lot of money on a big album and, get a few things here and there later on, or could wind up a lounge act in Vegas down the road based on that 1 or 2 hits, which is good. It's hard. I'm not one to make fun of one-hit wonders. I've never had a one hit. So I appreciate anybody that can write a song that's catchy enough or grabs the attention. But that's why the breeding business, think of that. It's just like the songwriters. It's just like the Carole Kings and Goffin and Boyce and Hart and John Stewart. That's where the royalties made.
That's right.
How'd you like that, Scott?
That's great. That's a great example.
So think about that. If we have another Triple Crown winner, we just have a super Derby horse come out of this, probably enjoy them for just this year. That's all you're going to get, because that's just the nature of the business. Why do you like the Kentucky Derby so much? Everybody that likes the Kentucky Derby owes it to a guy, Matt Wynn, who was known later as Colonel Matt Wynn. He was a Kentucky colonel, appointed that, I think, in the 30s sometime. And so he loved that. He went with Colonel Matt Wynn. But he was a successful Louisville businessman. He was brought over to run the catering back then at Louisville Racetrack, and then brought over to Churchill Downs, and he was so charismatic and was so able to see down the road and what might happen and could happen that he just kept moving up the ladder, became the president of Churchill Downs. Among the things he did in 1915, he persuaded the owner of a filly named Regret to come in and try to run against the boys in the 1915 Kentucky Derby. Of course, Regret won that race, the first filly to do so, and to this day, one of only 3 fillies to ever win the Kentucky Derby. And it was also during this time that Matt Wynn realized, even before people started talking about the flyover states, and of course back then the media was in New York. It wasn't New York and LA like it is now. So he would get them to take a train down from New York and have Red Smith and all these great Grantland Rice and these great writers of the time come in and cover the Kentucky Derby, and he would wine and dine them, and they'd have a great time, and they would go back and write stories about, you have to go to Kentucky, you have to see the Kentucky Derby, and this is just a wonderful piece of Americana that's unfolding every year in Louisville, Kentucky in May. And he got people to do that, and he did it so well that the Derby kind of took off on its own. Up until then, it was a good horse race. It was a race people enjoyed watching. People certainly in Kentucky and a few people in racing states got it. But because of Matt Winn being a great promoter of the sport of not just horse racing, but the Kentucky Derby specifically, going all the way back to the 19-teens and then through the 20s and 30s, and that's really how it kept blossoming. And even though I'm associated with the network, I think NBC has certainly carried it on in the last 2 decades with the way that they cover it and introducing the personalities. And that's a big part of why people like the Kentucky Derby. It has become a great slice of Americana. And so when you watch this weekend, just think about Colonel Matt Winn, who was on the 1949 mint julep glass, the official glass. I don't know how much that's worth, but if you have one, you might want to go through eBay and see. It might be worth a few bucks out there, the way that Matt Winn promoted the sport. You know, he was actually the Kardashians before the Kardashians.
It sounds like it.
Yeah, because what did Matt Winn do? He was just a great promoter.
Great promoter, yeah.
Very smart. Very smart to see that.
That's right.
Wow.
A lot like Colonel Parker, Elvis's guy. That kind of.
Yeah, except he didn't take 50% of Churchill Downs.
Exactly.
Colonel Parker took 50% of the, we'll get back to song. I read this, if we wrote a song and like if we'd have been a songwriter to give it to Elvis,
Oh, yeah.
that he wanted 50%.
Where would the rest go?
Yeah, he wanted 50% for himself. Parker did, and I guess, whatever Elvis got, which is why Elvis was not in A Star Is Born because Barbra Streisand wanted him. This is in the mid-'70s version where Chris Christopherson played opposite Barbra Streisand. She wanted Elvis Presley. But Colonel Parker wanted Elvis to get top billing, and Streisand obviously was a star. And it'd been a while since Elvis had even made a movie, especially a good one.
Yeah, wow.
How about that?
That's pretty good. Never know what you'll learn on this show.
Is this a horse racing show? I forget sometimes.
so.
It is. It says it right here, Scott. I'm looking. It says the horse racing show. There it is.
There it is. That's good.
Okay. Well, thank you for this pop culture interlude for us. Thanks to my guest, Jay Hovdey, today, Daily Racing Forum. It was fun talking about singer-songwriter John Stewart, and always good to talk with Dallas Stewart, the king of long shots, as he gets ready for the Kentucky Oaks. We'll be back next week to talk more about how the Derby went, what it means on the Triple Crown Road. Thank you for tuning in to this episode. For Ben Chaffins and Thomas Kenny, as always, and of course, the man that keeps it held together, Scott Hall. I'm Kenny Rice, and we'll talk next week.